Hello and welcome to another edition of Storytelling on Orchard Street. I'm Pete Salamiter, your host. I'm in the podcast studios at P&T Knitwear Bookstore. It's 180 Orchard Street. It's a great little bookstore. They got all kinds of books to choose from. They have a cafe. You can sit down at the table, have something to drink and read. They have events. You should check out their calendar. With me today in the studio is Alan Semerdjian. He is a writer, musician, and educator. He is the author of In the Architecture of Bone on Gen Pop Books 2009 and other collections of poetry. He has recorded or played on dozens of albums and with a myriad of musical projects over his 25 plus years as a music maker and a songwriter. Alan teaches English at Herrick's High School in New Hyde Park, New York, and is currently the 9th Poet Laureate of New York's Nassau County. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Pete.
Yes.
Nice to be here. Great spot.
Yeah, and thank you for driving in. It's a chore.
No, it's all
coming
good.
from Long Island to New York City sometimes.
I'm just over the border, so it's not that big of a deal. I'm just in New Hyde Park, and this is my home because we used to live on 14th and A for many years.
Got it.
And then perform down here all the time.
But anytime you have to get on the Bell Parkway, it's like cross my fingers.
That's a different story. Southern Brooklyn, that changes things.
Right.
Yeah, anywhere near the Verrazano. It's true. BQE used to be, I think, the worst road in America.
I mean, I grew up in Rockville Center, so I'm familiar with Long Island.
Oh, cool.
And I got to tell you, it's definitely gotten worse over the years as far as the traffic goes, and in the summer too. But you got here, and you got here on time.
Yep.
And we're going. We're recording. So just tell me a little bit about your background. Did you grow up on Long Island?
I'm a Queens boy.
Oh, Queens.
Grew up in a immigrant community in Queens, in Woodside, Queens.
Okay.
Many Armenians. I'm Armenian.
Right.
And we lived in a building 60-11 Broadway. So we're on Broadway, and it was that's where I grew the early years, and then kind of moved out to even farther in Suffolk County than I am now, actually.
With your family?
Correct. I was a child, so I was about 7, 8 years old.
Okay.
We moved out to Suffolk County, and it was, a sea change, paradigm shift.
Just be careful with the, you're not on the mic.
Oh, yeah,
So-
I'll back up a little. Oh,
No,
get
get
closer.
closer to
Got
it.
it.
Yeah.
I don't know
Stay
what,
close. Yeah.
there's I'll stay close.
Yeah.
That was a big shift. And I grew up most of the formative years, like middle school, high school, out there. My mom's still in the family home out there. Grandpa was a painter.
Okay.
Armenian painter.
Nice.
And so lived, around the arts a lot growing up.
Have any of his artwork?
Oh yeah. I've been archiving his sort of private collection.
Nice.
Almost upwards of about 1,000 pieces. Yeah,
cool.
it's like an heirloom of sorts, but
Yeah.
there's a kind of a functionality in the world because there are some Armenians, some art lovers from that. When I say that area of the world is, he was from Cairo. My mother's born in Cairo.
Okay.
So the Egyptian community and people that are sort of descendants of that, know about his work.
Right.
But anyway, growing up around the artist, I think, even though I was in kind of suburbia, which can be kind of creatively like deaf, I think growing around near the arts all the time and watch him paint every day.
Sure. Did he live with you?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
okay.
that was the thing.
Where was his studio?
When we were in Woodside, it was one of the bedrooms of the 3-bedroom apartments was the studio.
Right.
And then when we went out to Long Island, had more space. We converted the garage for his studio, so he had a considerable amount of space, and the whole house was kind of like his gallery. So something would be made and put up, and so it was cool to see that kind of I had that connection to art pretty early on, which for me didn't manifest in painting. It was much more as a musician and a poet.
Music came first, or the poetry?
Probably writing came first, like it does for almost every language comes first for all of us, right? So if you're going to be a creative person, you're probably going to do it with words early on.
That's funny. I started with music.
You did, huh?
Yeah. Because I wanted to be a Beatle.
Oh, nice. I love it. Well, don't we all? I don't
know. And eventually, so I tried guitar. I wasn't very adept at it. And then in college, I wound up jamming with some people. There was a drum set there. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Went back home, bought a drum set.
Tried your Ringo, your best Ringo.
Yeah. Somewhat. I wouldn't compare myself to somebody like that, but I had fun. I played in bands my whole adult life.
Yeah, I remember you telling me.
It's weird though. If people have listened to other shows, I don't want to get back into this because I've said it a lot, but I didn't think I could write. I would try occasionally, but it's like that stinks. And it just came up like maybe 2018 or 17 or something like that. I just started. I guess I was in kind of a stressful situation. I had to get it out of me, so I put it into words, and I was like, I like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think
I like the experience of it. I like talking about making stories.
Yes, I mean, if the impulse is there, and for you it manifested with music first, for me with language first, but for my grandfather with painting.
Right.
I think.
How about the parents? No.
Not really. Yeah. I mean, they were.
My parents hardly even listened to music.
Yeah, it wasn't really about that for them.
No, yeah.
I think sometimes for certain populations it like skips a generation. I mean, what I mean is that, if you have like a really strong artistic force in one generation, then oftentimes the next generation is kind of reacting.
Well, I don't know because I don't know. I don't know. I don't think it was there for my grandparents either.
Oh, okay.
Definitely not. Yeah, definitely not.
Okay.
But it was a different world. They were immigrants and had to work.
That's right.
So who knows? My grandfather came over here when he was like 11 or 10 or something like that. They just put him on a boat and sent him here.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting thing too, right? If you think about like you just said, they had to work. It's like oftentimes, when people who have that perspective don't view the art as work, right?
Right.
And we can understand that too, but it's like.
But they didn't have education either.
No, it's more. It's just going into the labor.
Yeah, my
force.
father didn't even finish high school.
No, my father didn't either.
Yeah, so.
My mother took like a year of lycée, I think, in Cairo, and that was, it wasn't. It's not an academic thing for them. It was more like, let's get into the workforce.
Right. So did you write on your own? Or was this like in school or
Yeah, it was mostly like kind of school, and I was an only child, so I kind of had. My parents were at work, and I was, again, around this grandfather who was painting every day.
Right.
This grandmother who was, for the most part, cooking and doing whatever she was doing every day. So, a lot of safety and love, but I had a lot of time.
Sure.
So I was kind of creating space and for, language, this, that, and I kind of, especially when we moved out to this, the suburbs, that was like, whoa, okay.
So did you have any formal training in music, or did you learn on your own?
I was more of a vocalist growing up. I did in high school and middle school, I did a lot of like sort of choir work, and I did some.
I got kicked out of the choir.
You did? Were you being
No,
bad?
I just couldn't sing.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't about behavior.
No, I was a good kid, but I couldn't sing to save a lick.
That's pretty rare.
I know. Well, they didn't want to take the time to help me out with it. They just said, "Hey, you get out."
Wow.
It was devastating.
I imagine
it was two devastating things happened to me, because the two things I loved the most was that and baseball. And I didn't make Little League either.
Oh, no. Wow, that's pretty tough.
Yeah. So maybe that's why.
No Little League.
Right.
What did Little Pete do?
I don't know. I listened to records.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's actually a good way to pass time.
Did you study later, like in college?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't study institutionally. I studied privately with lessons and things like that.
And what about the poetry?
Poetry, I studied academically. I
Right.
studied through, English degrees that in the undergrad and whatnot, and then English teaching.
Because you're a teacher,
degrees.
so you had to have that at some point.
Certification, teaching of English
So you did
language.
teaching right after, you went to college for teaching.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, for English literature, and then
right.
rolled it into teaching, got the teaching degree, and then the master's in fine arts at Goddard, which is up in Vermont, which recently has gone through some some economic hardship and is now closing. Which,
wow,
if anyone knows about the great Goddard College, it's a very progressive institution, amazing place. It is now pretty much almost it's nothing. It's a closed farm. Somebody bought it, and everybody's sort of shuffling to get their like thesis, works from the library. It's kind of sad, but great fond memories, amazing people, and great for me, a great education, academic / non-academic alternative education with poetry and the arts. Not too much, right? Music for me was like the school was kind of gigging and playing,
right?
Like it was more like we just go. I probably played hundreds of gigs in downtown here. I was in a band called Surreal with my dear friends growing up, and we must have played. There was a place right on Houston and Avenue Way right here. Oh my God, Street Level.
Huh.
Remember Street Level?
I don't. Oh.
And right down the street there was Spiral, which was like another.
There was a ton of little small clubs.
Yeah, just like little clubs,
right,
which was like the thing in the 90s.
Right.
And we probably played there, like, I don't even know, hundreds of times. And there's other ones up and down. Brownies, Pyramid Club, all that.
Yep, right.
So all this sort of like, this was like, to me.
Lismar Lounge.
Yep. Luna Lounge. This was like big.
The couple that started Luna Lounge, the bassist was in a band, a short-lived band that I was in that actually never got out into playing live.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was the owner. They were the owners of that. My wife designed the logo.
Oh, really? For Luna?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
You know what? They used it without telling her.
Oh no, Pete.
Yeah, that's a little weird history there. Sorry.
No, it's not. But it's funny because a lot of the new generation folks, even some of my students and stuff, play music. They're great, awesome people. They know Rockwood.
Right.
Maybe they know Living Room.
Sure.
And Janet Living Room, which was an awesome place.
Right.
But they don't know anything about those early, years. And meanwhile, like Kenny from Rockwood was in The Professor and Marianne, and they were playing around all those places that my old band Surreal was playing. And nobody got super, super duper famous. Maybe some people did, but it was like. It was cool. It was just a fun place to kind of, like I said, it was like a classroom. It was like we were all just kind of learning.
Yeah, I'd have to think about that. There must have been some people. Well, of course, in the late in the 70s, you had.
Oh no, I'm not. That was a generation. That was
But you're right, because I was playing out a lot in the late 80s into the 90s, and I just can't think. If I thought about it, it has to be somebody.
Yeah, I think after that boom of like the Talking Heads and Blondie and like all that.
Although I will say there were. I don't remember if I've told this on this show before. I hate to repeat myself, but I was playing at this place called Lauterbach's, which was trying to be.
I remember that.
It was in Brooklyn. It was it was right around the corner from where I lived.
Yes, I do.
It was on Prospect Avenue. It was in a house.
We never played in a house.
Yeah. He was trying to. The guy was from the Shirts. That was they were sort of like a local band that did pretty well.
Cool.
But so he was trying to make a scene because there was no people don't understand.
Yeah.
There was no Williamsburg. There was no. Now there's more music venues in Brooklyn maybe than there is in Manhattan.
You're probably right.
Anyway, so I did a gig. It was and Joan Osborne was on the.
Right, she was one that was.
But she wasn't. It was before she was anybody.
Right.
And I still have a notebook. She asked me if I was available to play drums for her. And like an idiot, I said, "Well, I'm kind of busy right now."
Yeah.
And then like a year or two later, I was like, she blew up. It's like, oh.
And I'm actually
I made that mistake.
I'm actually wrong because obviously the jam band scene, Blues Traveler, and Spin Doctors, and those guys are amazing.
Yeah.
And they're, and I know some of those guys, and they're just remarkable musicians. So they obviously came out of the New York City scene, but I guess I meant to say the genre of what we do.
There wasn't anything specific like the CB scene.
Not quite as that level, I don't think. There were a couple other ones, but
let's not get too far off into the show because we kind of breezed through the first quarter of the show.
All right.
Without you reading something.
All right, sure. I will put. I'll read something from some new stuff I'm working on. There's the book that. That I've been, it's a manuscript I've been working on. It's like the second full-length text, full-length book, full-length text. That it's called Birds Too Distant to Name. I'm kind of sending it around now. And it kind of captures a little bit of like maybe the ephemerality of what it means to be around right now. Because I always feel like things are kind of like here and then not there, like here and then not here at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll
like
read
what
that
kinds
poem.
of things you mean?
Like I just feel like, like think about experiences, right? Like there's like, here I am scrolling through an iPad. Like here I am, like, I'm in the moment with you, but like, let's say we're other people, like I'm on my phone, I'm somewhere else.
Right.
Like there's this notion of like, we're here and we're not here. I think COVID kind of accentuated that.
Sure.
I also think that some of our ideological beliefs politically were kind of shook, and there were some fissures in that. Like what we believed kind of went away and flew away over the last like 8 years. And there's a lot more kind of...
Well, it seems like the world changes more rapidly now than it did when we were kids.
Yeah, there's shifts. Yeah. There's major shifts. And I don't know if that's exacerbated by technology or what have you. This is a short poem. Maybe I'll start with this. But
okay.
This was this was published in a British literary journal. I'm forgetting the name. That'll come to me later. But just about a year ago. It's called The Here, Not Here.
Okay.
It's a short poem, but it's a good one to start with, maybe. She described it as the greatest story of our time. This idea of being present but not, occupying space, but the mind scrolling through another screen. And I immediately began to cry, not cry. Or maybe it was the fact that leaving is never leaving for me. That I, and perhaps everyone else, could not understand gone because we're still trying to get to that elusive spot right here. But some of us have figured out how not to hurt so much or send the package so that it actually gets there and not drive for hours in the car, not looking for, where was it again?
Oh, great, good ending. Yeah, you're so right. It's all this technology is great, but it is really a distracted world.
It feels like that experience. It's kind of zombie-like almost.
Like, all right, so I work in a cafe, and it's usually pretty busy, but I feel like I have to be busy all the time now. And if all of a sudden, like, let's say there's no customers, everything's done, and you're just with yourself, take the phone out. Like, what did we do before the cell phone?
It's hard to imagine.
You just stood there, I guess, or you talked to somebody.
Yeah, or look at a piece of something on the wall, or I don't know, write something, make a list of what you want. I don't know.
But see, we're conscious of that.
Yeah.
Because we know the before.
The before.
But like my son doesn't.
What about the people who don't know the before?
Yeah, my son he's 20.
He's 20.
Yeah, and he doesn't know the before really. I mean, maybe when he was a kid, he didn't have a phone until middle school, but
And I don't want to say that it's all bad in the sense of like I'm sure there were people who I don't know when the phone was invented, for instance, there were probably like massive tectonic shift where like, oh, people are gonna, they're not gonna walk anymore. They're not gonna do this. They're gonna get heavy. We're gonna get heart disease. I don't know, whatever they're thinking about.
Well, we're always afraid of technology when it starts.
I think so.
I mean, they were afraid of radio. It's like, what is that? It's a devil's work.
Or TV or whatever.
Or film.
Forget that was.
Yeah, but it seems like the changes were really slow.
Right.
Like the last 20, 30 years. You think about all the technology changes, and it's rapidly changing. Again, you got AI, and who knows what else is coming.
The level of intensity of this, it's like full-on gamma ray. It's like just, you're getting shot with.
And the thing is, like, okay, so maybe TV, they were worried about people being glued to the TVs and becoming stupid, which maybe in some ways that happened. But you had to, like, prior to that, you had to go somewhere to see a movie.
Right.
You had to actually make these things happen, and now it's just there. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that, the book tries to not only, like, I don't think the book is trying to paint necessarily a dark picture. It's just the collection is trying to just
So it's a thematic book.
It kind of is. It's loose, because it's like the poems are from like the last decade.
Okay.
The first full-length book came out in 2009, I think it was, with Gem Pop, and then and I did a lot of other little things.
That book, how long had you worked on it before that came out?
That was my like MFA work at Goddard. So that was a good couple of years.
Right.
And then it kind of sat, and then it kind of found a home. And then since then there was a bunch of other things, like this digital release I did with my dear friend Adam Bajakian, a guitar player from Vancouver, but he used to be in New York, where we created like a spoken word album commemorating the Armenian genocide. My poems, other people's poems, I read them. He played guitar. It was pretty intense. That's like talk about dark. That was an intense experience. And that came out in 2020. But that wasn't a full-length thing. I did a lot of like little things, a movie with one of my poems in film festivals, and different kinds of things like that. But it was, so I'm kind of looking forward to having like another physical book,
right,
which will be only my second full-length. I mean, some chapbook stuff, but
sure,
yeah. So, but again, I think it's thematic, but I think it has like. It goes into different places. It still deals with family history. A lot of my work tends to deal with, growing up Armenian, dealing with this sort of background of the Armenian genocide. I don't know if the listeners know too much about that. It's like one of the darkest corridors of history of the 20th century.
Right.
And my grandfather was a survivor, and I write about it a lot. Definitely the focus
Is
of my
that
first
why
book.
he came here?
He came here, he would have probably stayed in Cairo. He came here because his daughter actually was here, married in a kind of a complicated, toxic kind of relationship, and wanted her parent, begged her parents to come. And I think there was like
This is like an aunt.
This was in 1971.
But that's not your... not your...
No, not my mother. It was my aunt. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And my mother was the youngest, kind of following along.
Okay.
And I think her brother also wanted some economic opportunities here that maybe didn't have over there. So it was kind of like, all right, makes sense. And there was a little bit kind of a burgeoning community in our Armenian community in Queens happening, like I said earlier. So they kind of made the move, and
was that part of your grandfather's history depicted in his paintings?
That's interesting. There was a poem I read about. I'm going to read it later, maybe, but the paintings were never really about the Armenian. I looked for this stuff because I've like archived it a lot, and I wrote about it, and they're not. They're strangely, the paintings are
abstract, or
they're a little abstract. I mean, I've definitely been archiving it, but they're kind of. He's known as a Cubist impressionist, so he borrows from multiple things. Sometimes he even gets to be abstract expressionist. Sometimes
is any of this online? You have any of it online?
You can Google it, but it's not on a. It's not. I mean, I have a private site that I share with like galleries and places when we're doing work.
I'd love to see it someday.
Yeah, I could definitely share it with you. And then eventually that will become, I think, my work. When I shift away from the classroom, and it'll probably be my soul work.
Okay.
To kind of curate that and make it happen. Leave it for whatever follows.
Yeah, it's a great thing to do.
I love it. It's very nourishing. But what's interesting is that he would write about. He would paint about these like figures, like two like lovers on a subway, and like a father and his son. An elderly woman looking out a window, and it was like none of these things had genocide thematic resonances. Sure. But you can see that he was kind of slowly assembling like the family that was taken away from him.
Okay. Wow.
It was a fascinating thing, and so and I'm not I'm not an art critic per se, but some people have written about his work, and they've talked about that a little bit, how the work the intention of the work was to kind of through the frames, through the artwork, through the process, to kind of reassemble this thing that was taken away from him, which I find really poetic, and beautiful.
And how does it reflect in any of your writing?
The genocide?
Yeah.
I mean, I think going back to the ephemeral conversation, the Armenian genocide historically has not been recognized by the perpetrators, Turkey, in any kind of meaningful way, up until Biden's acknowledgement, which was kind of a tepid acknowledgement, and then followed by some stuff that was bad that he did with Azerbaijan, which is another story. But it's never really been fully reconciled on a global stage.
Right.
The way these, other horrible instances of, man's inhumanity to man have been.
Right.
So that creates an experience for somebody who's a grandchild of genocide, of this kind of visibility, invisibility, this kind of like seeing myself like partially disappear in some conversations, going back to the ephemerality thing.
Right.
Like I'm here 1 minute, but I'm also not here. Like maybe you believe what happened, maybe that person doesn't believe what happened, you know? So there's this like, back and forth, this constant drive to be acknowledged, to be seen, to be, somehow put into history and not like pulled away from it.
Have you been to Armenia?
Yeah, my partner and I went in, I'm forgetting now, but it was over a dozen years ago, maybe 13 or 14. And, it's a thriving country in some ways.
Was that your first and only time?
Yeah, first and only. I'm going to go back again when Nico's a little older, I think probably in the next few years, hopefully. It's growing, it's changing. We have a lot of friends there. There are people who kind of, move there permanently. It's in a precarious location. It's, borders closed with Turkey. Terrible ethnic cleansing kind of happened in Azerbaijan, where 100,000 Armenians were pushed out, and of course, where did they? Some violently, and moving to. So there's like all these refugees from Armenians from Azerbaijan in Armenia right now. So it's a precarious situation. There's the south is Iran, the north is Georgia. It's just
It's a hotbed.
It's a strange, it's got a lot of stuff, but it's so beautiful. And you cross the Caucasus and the mountains, and you just are transported. You're into this other world.
Right. When you went, did you write anything?
A bunch, yeah. I mean, I remember, there were definitely like just notebooks full of stuff that I pulled from, and I think the book had already just been out. But I remember now. The book was, I don't want to get into the name of the publisher, but there was like an almost moment with a publisher, New York publisher, that kind of went really sour in a bad way. So I had sort of inked the deal, and then I went to Armenia, and I was hoping that the publisher could get some books over there. It was like this whole thing, and then kind of turned out to be a really strange thing. And then we ended up with Gem Pop, which was great. But it was kind of like right on the heels of that book being done. So all the poems that were, all the seeds that were drafted there kind of like, ended up in other journals, not in that first book.
Right.
But, and some of them I think might even be in here, some images.
Why don't you read something else? We're in a natural place for you to do something.
Sure. Maybe I'll read some, like an Armenian thing that we're just talking about cool. That. Right. The other book, the other poem was published in Pop Shop, by the way. It's really cool, like beautiful literary journal, and I think it's out of London. If readers want and our listeners want to know, so let's read. Let's try this one here. This is called. This just came out in Hanging Loose. I think this one, which is one of my favorite journals in the whole universe. So this one. Just came out, yeah. So this is about grandfather and some of the stuff we're kind of talking about. This will also be from that new manuscript. It's called The Cubist Impressionist. There's a deafening siren in the remains of my grandfather's sketchbooks. Each page a serious investigation at the border that includes questions like, what have you been carrying? And for how long? Each turn, a hawk, wing clipped, yet miles high. Each measure of pen and ink and charcoal and paint, a stain on a stain, a year beyond the year, unimaginable future, without family or form, but portraits after portraits. Misak, who loved Monty and used to come over and talk about the world, said gravely with microphone, that my grandfather didn't have one family. Instead, he had thousands of faces in the frames, and glances and angles and noses, shoulders like bones sticking out from canvas like Syrian sand, arms around one another, and cubes and towers and cities of red and blue and orange reflections of deserts in those skyscrapers' eyes. The way the higher they got, the more they grew level with the mind and set course for memory's shores, which were always the impossible pass, except when Misak came over, or when someone played the right music, Gomidas, Dvorak, the empty bowl, and Medzbaba descended the stairs to his studio and shut the door.
Awesome. Who's Misak?
Misak was a family friend, worked for a wonderful Armenian cultural arts org called the Armenian General Benevolent Union. And he was a firm believer in my grandfather's art. When he came over here, I think you may have known him from Cairo. He was responsible for getting a gorgeous, like, beautiful picture book of his art kind of made into the world. Misak was a family. He'd come over to eat the manti and other Armenian food that my mom and my grandmother.
What's the manti?
It's like an Armenian ravioli.
Oh, okay.
It's like a
Right.
very, you kind of roll it and you make it. It's got some beef and spices and stuff. It's pretty tasty. Some stuff if you never had Armenian food, you got.
I have not. Yeah.
It's pretty cool. There's a good place called Sevan in Sevan in Queens.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Queens is a hotbed for all kinds of
Yeah, they got a
ethnic
lot of
food.
great stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a new one, actually, I just went to my friend's place. It's called Little Armenia Cafe in Greenpoint. Check that one. Those are the two places I would recommend for anyone interested in Armenian food.
So I'm just curious about your experience as a teacher.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. So how many years have you been teaching high school? It's high school you've been teaching?
27. I think I just finished up 27 years. 25 at one particular high school.
Wow.
A couple of years in Brooklyn at a middle school.
25 at Herrick's?
Herrick's, yeah.
Okay.
And 2 years at the Brooklyn School for Global Studies before that.
Okay.
Which reminds me I have to buy back those years, but it's a different story. And then I also did like a little bit of time at other institutions. There was like an after-school program in Huntington when I lived in Huntington, when I was living at Walt Whitman's house. Right. And that's another story. And I
didn't realize people live there.
Well, it's a caretaker. Like a lot of it's not like a traditional residence. Yeah, it's a museum, so you need. Right. So there are a couple of like National Historic Sites have not all of them, but some of them have caretakers that need to be there if something goes wrong. And it would, like sometimes when I was living there, like whatever, the alarm would go off, some cat would cross into the something crazy.
What was that like? Living there?
That was a trip. It was it was a really
was this something you did like after college or something?
Yeah, so it was a very. So think about like probably the most like kind of fertile, energetic time of your creative life. Whether it's maybe late 20s, early 30s, whatever it is. Right. Maybe it's now, I don't know. But whatever that is, like, and then put yourself in a museum. Right. Like living in a museum with two really great friends. Right. Oh, you weren't alone. Yeah, I wasn't alone. And and we built like a little community, and the we had this like experimental art forum once a month going on. We called it the Body Electric, and we set up music in the basement of the kitchen wing, which the kitchen wing was converted so whoever was caretaker could live there. Oh. So it was actually part of the foundation of the original Whitman property. I think the structurally.
So where you lived was separate from the museum, or?
So the museum was
I've
built.
Never been there.
But so there's two things. There's like the birthplace. Okay, that's the home where Whitman was born. Right. And that is like a early 19th century farmhouse. Okay. It's like they had about 500 acres. Wow. It was pretty big, yeah. And he lived there for a little while, and then he kind of took off. then he came back, and then he taught when he was like in his teens in the Huntington area, in the Centerport area. Then he's in Brooklyn. He's kind of bounced around New York. But that house is also accompanied later on. It was built much later. I think it was, I'm going to say in the 2000s. There was like you said, a museum, an interpretive center, which is like modern, and they have all sorts of, and they have information about Whitman. That's where most of the things happen. Like most of the different kind of events happen in the interpretive center, because like everything used to happen in the actual home, but it's a tiny little space. Sure. Like, I remember when I was a kid, I was looking. I think it was like Diane Wachowski, a great poet, was like reading her poems. Like imagine when Ginsberg was poet in residence there, he was like in Walt Whitman's house, like in the kitchen of the house, like reading poems, and like.
So is that what artist in residence means?
Yeah, they would have. Well, it was the resident artist at the Whitman house would come. I don't know if it's changed, but
because I know George Wallace.
Yeah, no, George is sort of like a permanent artist in residence there. Right. So he's George is kind of runs a lot of the poetry activities there. There are a couple of different sites, a couple of different ongoing things that he kind of books and he kind of runs and goes through him. But they also have once a year they'll bring in a poet, and George might even be part of this conversation too, where not necessarily connected to Long Island, but they'll be there and they'll give some sort of address at the birthday celebration. And the birthday celebration also is where they announce the student poetry winners for the year. Okay. Give out some, it's kind of a nice event for the organization. I met Yevgeny Yevtushenko there once, and we had a great, funny time there. It was really cool. And a bunch of other writers, Billy Collins and stuff. It was just really cool to be, living in this property. Mm-hmm. And taking out the garbage, mowing the lawn, doing whatever, and but all these amazing, literary figures. And I'm in my mid to late 20s, kind of learning how to be a writer, be an artist, or whatever. It
must have been a real good boon to your development as a
I think writer. It was, and I think there was a lot of freedom too that like I said, I was mentioned before, friends were part of this thing too, and I think it's really important to recognize that this was not like a solo adventure. It's like everybody kind of respected the place, and kind of got into the fantasy of it all, all the spirits, the energy, and we just kind of grew from it. We all just were on board. We respected the hell out of the place. Like when we had an event, nobody would damage anything. It was, and I think there probably was some fear from the board, that these young guys are living here, taking care of the property, and they're holding these events, and which ultimately led us.
Well, you could see why there might be some.
I could see that, yeah.
Trepidation.
Totally, no. There was one event in particular where we had it was like a wild one where there was like an artist that was displaying at the Whitney came out for one of our art events and did this wild video installation where he reveals himself. It's nude with the audience. It was a really strange kind of it was kind of in your face. Right. So they were like, whoa, but I thought Whitman would love it. I thought it was it was perfect for Whitman, and because talk about pushing, transgressing boundaries. Right. But in any case, it was a great time there. I don't even know how we got onto the Whitman birthplace thing. You're talking about teaching, I think.
You mentioned that.
Yeah, because I used to work. Yeah, I used to work also out in Huntington, and then a few other places. Right. In Long Beach, there's a school called a transfer school called the Harriet Eisman School. So I did work in a variety of places, but always kind of Herrick's has been the most consistent hub. Right. Okay. For education for me. I learned a lot there.
Are you at the point where you could retire?
Soon, I think. Yeah, in a few years, probably about 4 or 5 years. We have to, there's some conversations that have to be had. And,
right. What would you do if you did?
I think probably write some more, make some more music, and in the way that I need to. And what I mentioned before, I think the goal is to... the exit strategy as I move into the next 20, 30 years of my life or more, I really want these Samsonian art pieces, that's my grandfather's last name, right, to have maybe increase scholarship and find more homes for them in the world. Some of them exist, like in the Museum of Modern Art in Cairo. It's a gallery up in Providence. There's a handful of places that have his stuff.
Okay.
So it would be nice to have a little bit more of a concerted, organized, reveal of all this stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
So that might be my goal.
So that's a great thing to look forward to.
I think so.
Right,
Thanks.
right.
Yeah.
So does the teaching? I mean, I guess most artists have to have a day job, and at least yours is connected to your passion. But does it hinder your existence as a poet, or do you get inspired by the young people sometimes? Or
It's a great question, man. Yeah, I think there are nights when, throughout various points in my career, when I'm out, it's 11, it's 12 o'clock, we're doing this thing, and there's more opportunity to network, to connect, to go check out another musician, to go check out another poet, to go do this. And I'm like, I got to wrap it up. I got to be in the classroom at 7:30 tomorrow.
Right.
And I pull out, and there are all these other, the night keeps going on, and those kinds of, I don't know if they're sacrifices. They're just, what they are. They're kind of, you're putting your energy in different things.
Right.
So at first I used to think about it as the things that might be limiting my career, in terms of maybe I could have had more records, digested and taken in by, greater fans or whatever, if I were more out and about. Let's say I toured double the amount of time that I did.
Right.
And was able to record more on a whim and kind of take these chances that my musician friends that only do music do. Same with poetry. Let's say instead of an 8-date book tour for the book, maybe I'm doing a 20-date thing or 25, and then I'm kind of moving and I'm taking some chances and I'm putting it on my own dime, but or I'm writing a grant instead of grading the essays,
Right.
And it's like those kind of shifts of attention and time, I think they could have served my individual, disciplines and practices in a more professional level.
Well, you have two of them, so that's...
Yeah, no,
so you have music and the poetry, and then you teach, so you got these three things. That
it's kind of something I've reconciled along the way. It's like I'm making I've made a choice that I'm going to be part of these conversations. I may not be the leader of these conversations, and I don't even know if I want to be necessarily, but I want to be part of these conversations. I have something to say in them, So I hope that I'm able to be heard. I hope I'm able to be, to offer something mindful and meaningful to these conversations, whether they be aesthetic, literary conversations or conversations about history and who's forgotten, or, whether they be, musical conversations, the newest indie kind of sound or whatever. I want to be able to contribute to those things.
Right.
But I also know that so much of my my heart work, if I can use that phrase, comes from, working with kids. I think it was Randy Bomer, who's a great educator. Now he's in University of Texas in Austin, and one of my dear mentors early on as a teacher. I think it was him. We were having a conversation. He was at Queens College. He was talking about, you got to think about what you want to do in the world, and if it's, when you're choosing careers and stuff. And for me, it was about working with language, because I love language.
Right.
Working with, people, right, and then finding spaces where I can kind of drift away. Summer. Right, so you have these three prerequisites that kind of really fit into that. And then I became what kind of teacher? Well, the language thing moved me into English as opposed to music.
Right.
So it was really kind of it kind of fit in. And for me, I guess it was there are definitely sacrifices, but it's teaching itself is a kind of an art, man.
Well, because you've done it so long, have you seen past students actually, succeed go on and become writers or poets?
Yeah. Well, nobody wants to be a writer. These kids that when they get, some of them, I've definitely seen a couple of kids that are doing amazing things.
Right.
And some of them are, scientists and doctors and lawyers and this and that. And then there are a few of them are indeed working on, they've released books and
Right.
they're...
So that's got to feel pretty good.
It's pretty amazing, yeah. And
have you kept in touch with
a bunch?
Yeah.
I mean, there are a bunch that I'm really close to. In fact, over
Right.
the years, and they're like it's just nourishing to me. Just to be able to, that I think our interplay is, as important to. It's going to sound weird, but like, how like you're a musician, right? So like you have that camaraderie with your like your band and your audience, right? You have like that kind of like the students are part of that community of the art of education. So it's like, maybe not a band, but kind of like a bandmate. I mean, you went through this like ride together, the classroom ride. But yeah, them and other teachers, colleagues, it's like that experience is, really irreplaceable. So it has its unique. So I'm really deeply connected to my students, and I feel like, for me, seeing students as individuals became like the heart of my teaching. Right. Like number one.
Right. Well, it sounds like a good way to go about it.
Oh yeah, man. Over all that other stuff is important, right? Obviously, how syntax of a sentence and this and that and all the different things that we try to do as English teachers, meaning making tools, literary tools, all this kind of stuff. But it's for me, the big shift happened when we start seeing individuals for who they are and the relationships that are established in the classroom. And it's not always easy in every community.
Right.
It's definitely not always easy. I've been really, really blessed to have, a supportive, administration and people that kind of allow me to follow some of my, maybe creative pursuits.
Right. Well, I would think that's why you stayed there for so long.
Yeah, that's a part of it.
Right. Yeah.
That's a part of it. Yeah.
What else would you like to read? Make sure we keep it.
Yeah, man. I don't know. It's a good question. I'd like to, let's see maybe we'll read something from, I'm going to keep with the new stuff. I'm really digging the new stuff.
Okay.
Maybe we'll talk about education. Maybe we'll read something from, this is actually this is called, I just read this at a professional development thing we were doing. Let me just see where it is. So this one was published, this is going to be in like the next book. I'm kind of thinking about the next book. It's
not the one that's currently.
Yeah, not the one that I'm
You're
trying
thinking
shopping
that far
around.
ahead.
I kind of am. Yeah, it's going to be a book on
right.
education, and I think that can only be, created when I'm retired.
Right.
So, so it's called Education in America, and actually this one was Anselm Berrigan published this in the Brook and Rail many years ago. I don't know if you know Anselm's work, but he does some really cool stuff with Brooklyn Rail. He's been kind of ongoing poetry column there is just like kind of epic. But this poem, I guess, is about what education should be in America, and there are a lot of people that don't want it to be this way.
No, especially now that.
Man, you're not. I mean, that's what This is these are dangerous times right now. So I think it's very, very important to know that. You're not just voting for, a charismatic figure or some conversation you and your friends are having. You're voting for the state of public education. Right. You're voting for, true value, American, real American values, not perceived, overzealous, crazy, whatever. I don't want to get into all that. But the education in America, this is called, it should be for everyone, of course. Like a bridge or an island in the city for some green to grow on is for everyone. Not an apartment complex or a villa in the hills with its train distance. Everyone, like a male person, delivers to everyone. And like everyone loves rain or snow on the tongue at least once and then is forever lost in the finding of that tending to. Should be an open door. Or better yet, an archway. Not a conduit for kings and their flowing trains, how they weave and twist around a corridor or a country, but a reclaimed space, wide and full of promise, old and true, deep sediment, the buried layers, the cave drawings, the origin dreams of thinking. It should be new too, forever changing in that impulse that serves to shape the shift, not only prepare. How awful a thought to prepare, as in to tolerate, or to only go this far. Not only reality check minds that are ready for all of this and necessarily more. Yeah.
All right. Well done. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
You got a good voice for this, too.
Oh, well, thanks.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Besides being an excellent writer, you got a good voice for reading. Not everybody has the two things.
It could be all the gigs,
right.
You know.
So when I guess you must have when you sent me some talking points, were you talking to your phone?
When I was driving,
yeah,
it was so much traffic, right. Pete, that I was like literally had my foot on the brakes. Right. No one was going anywhere. I'm like, let me just...
Because I need to ask you, what is the poet outrage of Nassau County?
Oh, that's not the outrage. Oh, man, that is a hefty typo.
Talk yeah.
That is funny, man.
Yeah, there is
poet
some...
outrage. Wow, that's it. There probably is some kind of poet outrage.
Oh, there's a lot of that. There's a lot. No, tell me about becoming the poet laureate. Was it recent, last year?
Year? No, it was this year. It was, and mid-June. It was a really cool. It was amazingly. It was like an honor.
Right.
An honor I couldn't even imagine having. I was nominated by a member of the Nassau County Poet Laureate Society, which handles the work of selecting a poet laureate for the county executive's office. And I didn't think much of it because I know there are people that are way more prolific than I am. I don't, as we've already spoken about, I kind of, everything's kind of fragmented for me because I do a few different things.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I'm going to throw my hat in here, and I would love to serve. I love serving, and teachers are ultimately civil servants. So I was like, this would be cool. Let me kind of do it. And so I put it in. I didn't think much of it, and all of a sudden I was told. And it was, to me, I was like, holy smokes, this is crazy. And then I've been realizing how diverse and interesting the community or the county is in terms of the various communities that have like ongoing poetic practices. And it makes you, when you have that kind of position, and I don't know if you've ever had that position before or if you've, kind of had interface with that, but it really, it's such a cool thing because you don't really realize, but there's there's somebody meeting at that building every month, for a poetry circle, and there's somebody down the street here, and there's a group here, and I think all those people, have some interesting stuff to say, and a lot of them, they're like reaching out to me, and I'm kind of reaching out to them, and I want to learn more, and
so has it added you're going out more for the
poetry?
I
think I'm going out
to more events.
And that's it's a heavy thing because I don't know how I'm going to. There was a point I became a father 9 years ago, and that kind of changed the gigging and the touring. Kind of limited all that.
Of course.
And
so you have one.
Only one, my partner and I only have one. Yeah. And we ended up, just the way it works. Right. I do a lot of the, running Nico around for stuff, and and I've chosen that. It's beautiful. And then I'm realizing, wow, a lot of, there's a lot of stuff. Like I could go out and this is a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing, but I can go out every night and find myself at a different reading almost every night in Nassau County. It's not. It's a big county, I guess, but it's not like a small county in upstate New York. It's probably the biggest, other than Queens County or Kings County, probably. Right. Actually, Manhattan's. Which one's the biggest of the boroughs? In terms of numbers, population.
I thought Brooklyn was.
It would be Brooklyn, right? Yeah. Kings County. Yeah, but I guess it would be. Yeah, I guess it would. Sometimes I get mixed up because the most languages spoken in Queens, but the most people in Brooklyn. I get everything kind of mixed up. But it's but Nassau County is huge.
Right. Yeah.
And I didn't
Well, it's
realize.
more populous than Suffolk, I think.
Yes.
It always was anyway.
It always was,
But
yeah.
Suffolk is larger.
Yes, it's a little longer, wider. It goes out into the Hamptons.
Nassau's
and Montauk.
Nassau's very popular.
It's like a condensed, like a dense.
It really is very
thing.
dense. It's so different than even when I was growing up.
Yeah, you Rockville Center, you said?
Rockville Center, yeah.
Yeah, do you remember because I'm saying this now, I mean, I wonder if is there a burgeoning thing happening with poetry in Nassau County, or was it always like, do you feel like when you were younger, was there a lot of...
like I said, I didn't get into poetry until
later.
Yeah.
I got you.
Right.
So you wouldn't know.
I'm learning, especially by doing this.
Oh, cool.
I'm
Nice.
learning a lot, yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
So
great.
I didn't have that in my background. I was a rock and roller.
And there's a lot of connection between rock and roll and poetry.
Right. True.
Yes, I got that in my
and I find a lot of my poetry, music winds up coming up in it. Yeah.
So I think so to me, it's exciting. It's a little daunting.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can. Okay. Yeah. I think Sam was just telling us we got about 10 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, we're at the end.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
And anyway, the long story short, it's a little daunting too. Like it's exciting, but oh man, I want to go to this place. I want to go to that place. But I also have to
There's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
You're a teacher. You get your own stuff to do too.
Exactly.
So I usually like to read one of mine.
Let's do it. Yeah.
And since we're almost at the end of this here, it's called Dream of What Was. And like I said, music comes up a lot, or the idea of a musician and their place in life. I don't always play the notes clean anymore. My hands are worn and no longer lithe. The words stumble out because life has been hard and memories get mixed like buttons in a coin jar. Friends have come and gone, many have died. I sing about them all without really trying on old creaky stages that are soon to be torn down. I carry my case home that has gotten heavier with time and struggle to get the key into the door's lock because it's bent and ready to crack. The door opens into the dark, lonely boarding house room, made more so now that you are gone. I lay my guitar down with a care like it's baby, my only possession of worth in a world full of plenty. I turn on the lamp with its bulb that flickers and look around at my bare and stark surroundings. It's late in the night and I'm flat out tired, so I lay my weary body down on a bed that is warped and crooked, and I'll dream of what was, not what lies ahead. It just seems like a better option at this stage of my life.
Thank you.
Age comes up a lot in my writing too. You get to a point where, holy shit, how did I get to be this age,
The you kind of slipped in there in that point. I thought we were going in a different direction. It's interesting. The you, I wasn't sure if it was about just an introspective thing, but then there was an actual calling out to somebody.
Right.
I really appreciated that. That kind of slipped in there and changed the imagery for me.
Yeah.
I really do think every song is about, my son said it to me, he's like, why is every song a love poem, Daddy? Or I think that's exactly what he said. Every song is a love poem.
Well, love is a big part of the human experience.
Yeah.
Either the lack of it, or missing it, or wanting it, or having it. It's really humanity.
Right. It's our emotion.
By the way, my wife just started making me these buttons.
Let me check them out.
And so this one is the logo for the show here, Storytelling on Orchard Street. So you get that. And this, since you were on the variety show, the very swell variety show, you get one for that too.
Oh, that was a great gig, man.
Yeah. So I just wanted to give
much.
a plug because the next one is coming up next month, September 7th. It's at Young Ethel's, Saturday, September 7th.
Great room, by the way.
Yeah, from 3 to 5. There's 3 poets. There's musicians. There's going to be 2 comedians this time, and me and my little project, The Bitter Pill.
Who was the guitar player that I think was early on in the set when I was there?
Who?
David something?
Doug.
Doug, yeah.
Yeah.
I liked his style. He had really interesting voicings. And
he's very into like hot tune and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And he's also into the what do you call it? The desert music, that kind of thing. He has a lot of that going on. So while we wrap up here, any final thoughts? How do people find you? Your social media?
Probably you could do
to that,
at Alan Semerdjian, ALAN Semerdjian, SEMER. Tough one to spell. So SEMERDJ, like a DJ at a party. IAN.
Right.
So Alan Semerdjian, pretty much on all the socials at Alan Semerdjian. I have a website that has some of my music featured, and if anyone's really interested in the music, they can go to. I love Bandcamp. I think is a really great platform, and because people can kind of pay what they want. If they want to purchase it, if they want to stream it, they can. It's like the alternative to Spotify. Though my music's on Spotify too.
Cool.
2 of the albums. Eventually there'll be a third. Anyway, so you could find me on Bandcamp too. It's Amerge, AMERGE.bandcamp.com, and that's like an archive, an ongoing archive, and I'm annotating it.
Cool.
So it's kind of cool. And then there isn't like a home for poetry, but you'll find a lot of poetry links. My publisher has some poem. You'll find stuff on poetry.
Cool. Well, it's time for us to get the theme song going.
Cool. I love it.
You've been a great guest.
Thank you, man.
I was really happy to learn more about you, your grandfather's art. Hope to see that someday.
Yeah. Real generous, Pete. I appreciate with your time and your
thank
questions.
you. Thank you for coming down. You've been listening to Storytelling on Orchard Street. I'm your host, Pete Salamita, and with us today was Alan Semerdjian. And look him up, and he's got a lot going on in his life, a lot of art creation. So until the next time, thank you all for listening, watching, or however you're taking this in. Bye-bye.
Peace.